era in which Hal was Spectre was that this was a limited go. This wasn't like Jim Corrigan, who could have been the Spectre forever. Eventually, Hal would come back as Green Lantern. That was perhaps the worst kept secret in the DCU ever since Day of Judgment. And my thought is that when Green Lantern Rebirth came out in 2005, that really was time for Hal to part ways with the Spectre. But still, to see this fourth volume last only a little over 2 years, it shows that the book wasn't really captivating or grabbing enough readers. I'd like to think that this title could have lasted about 5 years, and along with the Kyle Rayner volume of Green Lantern, could have led into Green Lantern Rebirth. But just on different counts, this was not the sort of series that fans wanted to read. But again, the series ended with plenty of time to tell other Hal Jordan Spectre stories. And certainly during this 2-year period, Hal was appearing in different DCU books. Of course, he played a very important role in the return of another DC icon, Green Arrow. And this was all thanks to Kevin Smith, who was the scribe for the new Green Arrow series, which actually started off as, I want to say, a 12-part miniseries, and then, based on the success of that miniseries, just continued on as an ongoing book. Now, Mr. Smith built on a couple of things. One, he used the events from Final Night as setup for Green Arrow Quiver, and he also used the final panel from the final issue of the previous Green Arrow run to bring back Oliver Queen. In the final panel of that final issue of the Connor Hawk run, we see the tombstone for Oliver Queen. And in the final panel, we see two men standing at the tombstone. We only see one leg from each man, specifically their boot. But clearly from the panel view, we can tell it's two men, and they're both dressed in green. So in Green Arrow Quiver, Oliver Queen has somehow come back from the dead. And it's revealed that this Green Arrow, who's somehow been de-aged by a good 15 years, is actually a husk who just has copied memories of a younger Oliver Queen. And it's revealed that near the end of the Final Night story, Parallax came along and scraped some of Oliver Queen's DNA off of Superman's costume. And Parallax, or Hal, used that DNA to create this newer, younger body for Oliver Queen. The only problem was the real Oliver Queen's soul was in heaven, and he was actually at peace in heaven, and he didn't want to come back. But then it wasn't until the final issue of the Quiver story arc in which the de-aged Oliver Queen's body was very nearly taken over that the real Oliver Queen's soul screamed out for Hal, who was now the Spectre, to do the job and reunite body and soul. And so as the Spectre, that's what Hal did. in order to bring Oliver Queen back, mind, body, and soul. And so that led into the Green Arrow ongoing. In fact, there would be a couple of nice moments between the two leading up to Hal's return as a Green Lantern. Another Hal Spectre storyline that stands out in my mind is the 5-part story Dead Again, starring Deadman. Clearly, different folks at DC wanted to see its story with Deadman in the lead. And basically, Deadman goes on a bit of a time-spanning journey where in each issue he witnesses the death of a character in the DCU from the past. So in the first issue, he sees Barry Allen die during the Crisis. He travels to the time in which Jason Todd is killed. He also witnesses the death of Superman. And instead of these fallen heroes' souls going to the afterlife, they're actually plucked and imprisoned by Neron. And this was yet another attempt by DC to make Neron a relevant, preeminent big bad in the DCU. And it seems more like a nostalgia piece in that a lot of readers were saying, well, we can kind of tell that the story is going to end up with Deadman winning because, of course, these are established historic events. You're not going to undo the death of Barry Allen. You're certainly not going to change the events of the death of Superman. And in fact, midway through this miniseries, Superman's soul escapes, and we see Superman's resurrection and return to his iconic costume as it was originally rendered in the reign of the Superman storyline. But it all turns out that Neron is attempting to change the timeline, and his ultimate goal is to prevent Hal Jordan from becoming the host of the Spectre. Neron's true goal is to claim the power of the Spectre for his own. And throughout this miniseries, we see Deadman talking with Ramakrishna, but in the end, it's revealed that it's not Ramakrishna that Deadman has been speaking to. It's been the Spectre. It's a kind of story where you might like it for some of the really nice art. There's some Dan Jurgens art, some Jim Aparo art, which will take you back to stories from yesteryear. It's not a story that I would pay full cover price so by any stretch today, but it's just a story which stands out to me and probably doesn't get talked about at all on other podcasts out there. One last neat story I can touch upon comes from the third volume of Green Lantern. This is the milestone 150th issue of the series, which at this time featured Kyle Rayner in the lead. And issue number 150 concludes the Power of Ion storyline. And this final chapter of the story, Kyle is coming to a final decision about what to do with his godlike powers. And he goes to different people for counsel on what to do. And before he makes the decision to expend all of that energy to reignite the central power battery on Oa and to bring the Guardians back to life, one of the people who he consults with in space is the Spectre. And he has a nice heart-to-heart with Hal Jordan, who talks with him about the danger of holding on to absolute power for so long and the need to be responsible with that power and to make sure that it's being used to help others. And when Kyle thanks Hal for his counsel, Hal says, well, I wish that somebody could have been there for me to say these words. And it's one of those nice stories in which we see that Hal is actually content in his role as the Spectre. And it's one of those times where he's balanced. And we can look at the story and say, okay, so there were points where Hal's will was higher and he was able to combat Parallax's ever-increasing attempt to grab control of both Hal and the Spectre. And indeed, Hal as the Spectre would make at least a couple more appearances during the Kyle Rayner run on Green Lantern. Just looking at the timer, folks, I don't think I should get to talk about any other Hal as Spectre stories right now. I've got at least a couple more to talk about in part 3, and then I want to get into looking at the stories which led towards Green Lantern Rebirth, culminating in the separation of Hal and the Spectre. And then we can take a look at the lasting legacy of the Hal Jordan Spectre. So that'll come your way in 2 weeks' time. In the meantime, if you want to get in touch with me, you can email me at comicsandhistory@gmail.com, or you can head on over to Facebook and like the Comics and History page. Get regular updates on upcoming show releases. Until another 14 days have come and gone, this class is once again in recess.